Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by the Streaks New Year's Resolution Bundle by Crunchy Bagel. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. It's been a little while since we recorded, huh?
I feel like I've forgotten how to do a podcast. I was just plugging in cables and like, how do I do this? It's been a few, even if we kind of, especially for our other shows at Relay, we kind of fake it by recording shows in advance. So it may sound as though I have already recorded a podcast in 2018. In fact, I haven't. And that's the magic of preparing shows beforehand.
Yeah, it is. And we did the same thing with Unplugged. We put out for the club members, we put out an App Stories Unplugged on, I don't know, it was like New Year's Eve maybe, I think, or a couple of days. I don't remember. It was maybe December 30th. It was whatever the Friday before New Year's was, I think.
Yeah. So we thought, what better way to start the new year than by talking about email?
Yeah. I think email is the only topic that is more potentially controversial than task managers. I don't think it's maybe quite reaches that level, but people have a lot of opinions about email, and I know you and I both do too. And one reason I suggested the topic when we were talking the other day is that I've spent part of the time that we've had off going through my email, getting it organized, and trying to figure out a system that works better than what I'm doing. And I'll admit, a lot of my problems with email are self-imposed. I mean, it's that I don't read my email. Sometimes I let it go. But I've been looking at ways to try to simplify and streamline how I deal with email on an ongoing basis. And I just found the process incredibly frustrating. I know you've had a similar experience, so I thought we'd talk about it today.
Yeah, I think I spent months, honestly, trying different email clients on iOS. And this is something that I do regularly now, because I cannot find the perfect, maybe not perfect, but the email client that matches my preferences and my taste. There's always some design choice or some feature that is either absent or it's not exactly how I like it to be. And so I used to simply keep a folder on my iPhone called Email with 12 different email apps for iOS,
Right.
Which is funny because I remember the days when on the App Store, you couldn't make an alternative email client. And I remember it was like not even a long time ago, maybe 5 to 6 years ago, the only email app was the Apple Mail app, and you could use Gmail in Safari with the mobile web app, but that was terrible. It still is.
Yeah, it
still is
is,
terrible.
yeah.
And then it seemed to me like it was after the release of Sparrow on the iPhone. And I know that there used to be some email clients before Sparrow, but that one was the client that sort of popularized the category, and that with that app, which Google eventually bought, Apple effectively said, you can now make email clients. It's fine.
Right. And then we had Mailbox and a bunch of others
Mailbox,
that have all kind of come and gone.
Yeah. And those that have stayed on the App Store, I used to keep them in a folder. Now what I do is I set up notifications for updates and price drops for all these email clients in Lookmark, which is the utility they reviewed on the site a few weeks ago. And it allows me to keep track of app updates without having to keep the actual apps on my device. Even not because I don't have space for apps, but it's the mental fatigue of having that folder that says email with 10 different clients inside of it. It kind of bothers me. And so, yeah, I go through them all on a regular basis. I then reinstall them and I log into my accounts. But you probably think that I haven't tried them all. But honestly, I would say that it's very likely that I've tried them all indeed, from Airmail to Outlook to the most obscure ones like Unibox and Boxer and Spark. And I should have kept it.
And you tried. I know you've tried Newton and Inbox, right?
Inbox, Gmail.
Have you tried Polymail?
Polymail, AOL used to makes a client called Alto for some reason.
Oh, right, I forgot about that. Yeah,
I'll tell you what, John. I haven't tried Yahoo Mail because I fear that they would probably steal my passwords because they seem to have some kind of breach every other week.
And they have issues, yes.
But yeah, also, here's a pro tip. If you go on the App Store and you search for email, you're gonna get the story, the collection by Apple. And in this view, I have all the apps that Apple recommends: Spark, Outlook, Gmail, Email, Edison Mail. I think it used to be called Email by Easily Do. Now it's called Edison Mail. Airmail, Dispatch used to be a great third-party app, but it's not updated often anymore. Yahoo Mail, Inky, which is a secure email client, Unibox.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Also, I just remembered I tried for a few days, a few weeks ago, Canary Mail, which is pretty,
right.
pretty good looking, actually. So yeah,
It is.
I've tried a bunch of these apps, and I have many thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, just as an aside, when you go to one of those stories and you look at all the apps listed, and all you see are the little download arrows, you know you're doing a good job for Mac stories, right?
Good job, or you have a problem. There's
or you have a problem.
two
Well, I think
ways to
that the
look
two
at
are
this.
probably, I think the two are probably the same, really. It's interesting. I've not used as many or tried as many as you have, and I'm pretty impressed that you do that, because there's so much setup involved in email, because you have to log into all those accounts. Because I know you and I both have quite a few accounts that we have to log into, whether they're Mac Stories accounts or personal accounts or whatever. And even once you get beyond the login process, there's always some sort of customization or setup. It's eased by the fact that we both use SaneBox, which makes it a lot easier to be portable, because you can do a lot of the functionality that you find in some of these modern email clients right on the server side using SaneBox. But it's still not an easy task to dive in and set up an entirely new email system every so often.
Yeah, and that comes with its own set of trade-offs as well, because, for example, most of these email clients, they require you to grant OAuth access to your Gmail account, for example. So if you decide to stop using them, you got to remember to go to your Google account settings and revoke access to those apps, because it's not like I'm simply typing in my username and my password and then I remove my account and it's done. You got to go on the web and revoke access if you really want to stop using them. Otherwise, those clients will still be able to get all your messages, which may not be what you want if you want to stop using the iOS client. Because the idea is that most of these apps are actually services that you access via native clients on the iPhone and iPad and maybe on the Mac.
Right.
And I've been wondering, is this a problem that just you and I and maybe our friends of like Mike and Steven, we have with email clients, that we cannot find the perfect one? Or is it a problem that most people who try to get work done on iOS have? And I think I settled on the second answer. I think it's very common if you do any kind of productive work on iOS, if you try, especially to use the iPad as your main computer, it's very common to look elsewhere from Apple Mail. Because even though, Apple Mail is fine, it's pretty good for most people, it's got some serious limitations. For example, for Gmail accounts, it doesn't support push notifications. It doesn't have any kind of app integrations. It supports drag and drop on iOS 11, but I feel like that's not enough. The search feature is amazingly bad and slow, and it doesn't even support saved searches. And in general, I feel like Apple Mail on iOS, it's so far behind its Mac counterpart. It doesn't have all the same features, and it still feels like a companion app to Mail on the Mac. So I think it's very common, especially if you have an iPad Pro and you want to make sure that you want to get work done on iOS. I think it's not just me and you that we constantly look to other email clients.
Right. I think there are a couple aspects of what's wrong with the built-in apps. And one is, as you said, there are system limitations, because there are no share sheets, whether it's in iOS or on macOS. And that in and of itself is a pretty big problem from my standpoint. And then it doesn't have the modern features, things like snoozing or reminders or any of those other kind of things that you see in modern email clients that have become really kind of standard if you're going to start a new email client on at least on iOS.
Yeah. If you're a developer and you're considering making a new email client, there's unless you have a very unique idea on how to present email in a different way, because there are also a few of those apps that maybe try to show you your email as an iMessage conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can interact with email messages as if it were like a real-time chat. I've seen apps that allow you to swipe messages as if they were Tinder cards, and you swipe them left or right. I think we're not going to cover those apps today. And also, what I want to try and do is answer this simple question. What is our ideal email client? What is that we look for? What is that we absolutely need in an email client? And why do we believe that it doesn't exist? And how do we cope with the lack of this email client of our dreams?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, when I went through this process over the holidays trying to get my email in order, I actually set the bar lower than I have in the past, because I realized, at least with SaneBox in the background, surfacing the emails that I needed to see, one of the things it does is it will take any email where you've actually interacted with another human, as opposed to getting, spam email from someone you've never heard of, and surfaces that and puts it in your inbox. So that's a great feature. And so I've relied on that. And that takes me, I'd say, I don't know, 3/4 of the way there towards my ideal email setup. So what I did is I set my bar a lot lower, and I thought, well, you know what? If only I could create a link to the email and have a way to copy that and drop it into a task, for instance, or a note, that would be okay. Because, some of these share sheets and other extensions that you find in email clients will do things like turn the email into a PDF, or copy all the text of the email, or copy the text but not the attachment, for instance, and throw the whole thing, including a thread that may be like, I don't know, 8 replies old, into a task. And I don't want that. What I really want is to be able to get back to the message. Yeah. So one of the things that's key and is lacking on a lot of clients is the ability to get that kind of link that you can get back to the original message.
Yeah, that honestly, I feel like so we're going through the features that we like to see now. And I think the ability to link to an individual message and go back to that message is the single feature that I look for whenever I try a new email client. Is there a way for me to get a link to this message, paste it elsewhere, and reuse it later? And if the answer is no, that's going to be a problem for me.
Right. Regardless of whether you moved that message later, right? You may have filed it in a folder, but that link needs to go back to that original message so you can find it again if you need to see the details.
Yeah. So Apple Mail supports this. I was doing some research on this a few years ago. I think they added support for this, for the ability to generate a message, colon // URL. Years ago, back in the Leopard days, I think John Gruber used to have an article about this. And the way that these links work, they are structured so that they use the universal message ID. So each email message has an alphanumeric ID that the server identifies the message with. And Apple Mail simply creates a link to an individual message. And the beauty of this system is that no matter the folder or the mailbox that you move the message into, the link stays the same. So even if you generate, for example, on the Mac, let's say that you copy a link to the message, but then you move the message into your archive or to another folder. And if you try to reopen the link, it'll still work. It'll take you to a different mailbox, to a different directory on your email account, but it'll still work. Right. And on iOS, they rolled out support for these links behind the scenes with iOS 8, but now with iOS 11, they are fully supported, not exposed visually. There's not like a menu button in Mail for iOS that says copy a link to the message. But if you grab a message and you drag it into Things, for example, or you drag it into Gladys, you will see the message link that takes you back to the message in Apple Mail, no matter the folder where you move the message, which is a great feature. And I know that, for example, AirMail supports a similar system. It's also a local URL scheme, and it's used to identify messages in AirMail, and it works the same way. Even if you move a message to another folder, the link will still work.
Right. Spark does too, but only on the Mac so far.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I know that you and I have talked about, is that they rolled out, I guess it was a couple of months ago, they rolled out some app integrations on Spark with Todoist and some other services. And when you interact with one of those third-party integrations, you get the option of either copying the message or copying the link in. And I think their URL scheme is something like, I think it's sparkmail:// something along those lines. And that's great. But right now, you can only create those links on the Mac. You can't do it on iOS.
You can see here there's two different ways that developers do this stuff. There's the local URL scheme approach, which is what Apple and the AirMail folks use. And I'm pretty sure that Riddle and also Polymail, they use a web-based system where like I think with Spark, you get a sparkmailapp.com link, which is used as a universal link on iOS to take you back. Because if you generate a link to an email message in Spark using Spark on the Mac, but then you open that link on iOS, it takes you back into the Spark iOS app also. I'm not sure if it was, because I'm pretty sure that one time I saw a local URL scheme for Spark, and then I also saw a web-based one. So maybe they're testing two systems. I'm not sure. Also, I should say I'm on the beta for Spark, so maybe I see some features differently. But I know that Polymail has a feature for Teams, I think, that it allows you to basically share a message with other people in your team by creating a link to the message. And what this means is you're basically creating a private web page for an email message. So you can actually go on the web and share a link with someone, say on Slack, to an individual message, and they will be able to click the link. And even if they don't have, of course, access to your Polymail account, they will open a web page with the ability to see the message that was sent to you.
Thanks to the Streaks New Year's Resolution Bundle by Crunchy Bagel for sponsoring App Stories this week. Start 2018 on the right foot using this bundle. It's a bundle of 2 fantastic apps that will help you get in shape, both physically and mentally. The first app is Streaks. Streaks is a great way to form new habits. Things like remembering to work on your side project, learn a new language, quit smoking, and be more active. It won an Apple Design Award in 2016, and it's easy to see why. Every part of Streaks has been meticulously designed to be easy to use, look great, and keep you on track with hundreds of icons and 48 themes, including the all-new rainbow themes. Streaks is available no matter what you're doing, too, with a Today widget and an Apple Watch app. Streaks Workout is the other app. It's a great way to get in shape. It doesn't require any equipment at all. Just work out wherever works for you. It works on the iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, and Apple TV, so it's ready whenever and wherever you are. Streaks Workout just got a major update that adds all new animations and exercises to the app, making it better than ever. You can buy each app individually for a one-time upfront payment with no in-app purchases or subscriptions, or you can buy it at a discount as part of the bundle. I've got both of these apps, and they're a great way to form good habits and get in shape. So go check them out. We've got links into the show notes, both to the individual apps and to the special New Year's resolution bundle. Thanks again to the Streaks New Year's resolution bundle for supporting the show.
So the ability to link to messages, I feel like, is related to our need for app integrations, because ideally, every email client would have a feature that says, take this email message and save it somewhere else, whether it's in the form of a PDF version or a plain text version or a link, because there's no idea of an email message as an object. Like, it's not like sharing a JPEG, right? You take a picture and it's a JPEG and it can be viewed everywhere. There is a way, which would be the what's it called, the EML file format, but nobody uses it. Nobody saves email messages that way.
It's really a bundle of things.
Yeah.
It's files that are attachments, and it's text, and it's the headers, and it's a bunch of different things. You're right. And yes, so links, I think, is one of the fundamental things that is key to an email client. Also, good search. Surprisingly, there are not a lot of apps with really, really good search. For a long time, I kept the Gmail app on my iPhone simply so I could search my email better than I could with most clients.
Yeah, so Gmail search is fast because it's Google's best aspect of their system is the advanced search options, and honestly the performance. It's super fast.
Mm-hmm.
On the local side of things, AirMail has the ability to create folders for saved searches. Not folders, but like you can save a search and you can access the search in your sidebar. So that's pretty awesome. And also Spark supports the same.
Spark does that too, right?
With a twist that it supports natural language search. So you can tap into the search box and type out a sentence like messages from John with attachments, and you will be able to see those messages, and then you can save the search and re-access that for later. Yeah, because you can go into the appearance settings and you can pin a search into the sidebar and also folders. And in fact, now I'm using Spark for many reasons that I will go into later, but because one of the features is the ability to create these smart filters that allow you to specify the accounts that you want to search inside. And for example, messages that have a certain keyword in the subject or in the body of a message, that's really convenient. But unfortunately, most email clients, they don't support this feature. They don't support fast search or safe searches or filters at all. Apple Mail has slow search and no saved searches at all. Apps like Outlook, for example, they maybe show you recent searches, but they don't let you save them. And essentially, I think it's either AirMail or Spark if you want to have customizable search, but it's not as fast as Google's. So the combination of fast search and customizable advanced search that can be saved and can be filtered, it doesn't exist. Spark search is not slow, but it's also not as fast, not as immediate as the native Gmail search, which is too bad because I really like the way the Spark does searches.
Yeah, it's really one of the best features of Spark, I think, and I've just been using it a little bit myself recently as well. I think kind of what we're coming down to in part is the ability to both keep track of past messages and find messages as well. The linking as well as a search are kind of different sides of the same coin, right? And one of another aspect I think that I find crucial to an email client is having a unified inbox. But it's not just having a unified inbox. I like the unified inbox for when I'm on top of my email and when I just need to see the things that are in the inbox that same box is put in there. Great. But I also like to be able to drill down into the folders in an individual account if I need to.
Yeah. And I feel like the bigger topic here is I want my email client to be fully customizable.
Right.
AirMail wins here, if only by the sheer amount of options that it has. But as we covered many, many times before, that comes with a big trade-off, which is the stability and the polish of the app, because it can be a little daunting to customize. There's a lot of settings. And also it feels to me as if you go in and start changing all the possible options and pinning things into the sidebar and making changes to the way that accounts are presented, AirMail kind of suffers, the performance kind of suffers. And you can tell that if you have a heavy AirMail setup with a lot of customizations, the app is not as snappy and responsive and polished as it is with a pristine default setup, which is too bad. But also, I'm in love with the way that AirMail lets you basically customize everything from saving favorites with custom colors, like a favorite folder with a custom color in the sidebar. It lets you rearrange sections. It lets you put in separators between sections. You can change literally everything in the app. And for me, the ability, and Spark does some of this as well.
It does the colors for the folders. But for instance, one of the things that I missed a little bit when I was trying it compared to AirMail is it's handy to be able to edit the avatars for each client, right? So I had my Mac Stories account and I just threw the Mac Stories logo into the avatar. So it was really easy for me to say, well, that's my Mac Stories email. And my personal Gmail, it just has my face on it, right? So it's very easy to do. And Spark will pull in avatars from other accounts, but if that account doesn't have anything, then it's just kind of whatever the default is. And so I can't change that, for instance, for my Mac Stories account with the Mac Stories logo or anything like that.
There are other nice to have features. App integrations we have mentioned already. App integrations, there are two kinds. One of them is the local app integration that for example, in AirMail, you can integrate with apps like Workflow or Things or OmniFocus. And when you share a message with those apps, you actually get sent to the destination app, because basically Airmail is launching a URL scheme and it's taking you there, because there's no, that's the only way to do, inter-app communication on iOS still. But there's also the web service integration, which Airmail also does. But for example, other apps like Spark on the Mac or Newton that they do, they have these I think Newton calls it cards, these app integrations. You can, for example, connect your Todoist account or your Evernote account, even your Pocket account via the web. You can grant Newton access to your web accounts, and then you can save a message, for example, into Todoist. And it's very nice because you don't have to change context while you're using Newton on iOS. You can just save a message into your Todoist. But, and this kind of drives me crazy, if you save a message from Newton to Todoist, you only save the text of the message. So the subject and the body text, but it doesn't have a link back to Newton. So it's not like I want to, because ideally, here's if you're a developer of an email client, please listen to this because it's really important to me. I want to be able to save a message as a task. So not all my messages are tasks, but every once in a while, there's an important message that I need to take care of. And I want to be able to take that message, save it into my task manager with the link that takes me back to the message, so that when it's done, I can either archive it or I can reply to the person that sent me the message.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what I'd ideally like for my email client to do with that sort of thing is put the link in the task, the name of the task, so that I can type in my own text. So I can say, follow up with Federico, and then I'll have a link back to your email. And then maybe if you want to put the body of the email in the task, don't put it in the name of the task. Put it in the comments or a note, because a lot of these task managers have some sort of attachment feature. I don't want like 20 lines of text in the name of my task, because it overwhelms the task manager.
Real quickly, some other features. Before, there's a question that I want to ask you, but before, read receipts. I've become that person. I'm sorry. Every once in a while, I want to know when somebody else opens my messages. So read receipts, Spark has them, but only in the beta version. I'm not sure why. Basically, every other modern email client, Polymail, Newton, Airmail has it. So it's become a very common feature that you can probably find just about anywhere at this point. Snoozing messages. So also another common feature that was popularized by Mailbox years ago, the ability to take a message and say, remind me, show me this message again in 6 hours or in 3 days or next month. And the feature takes your message, usually puts the message in a folder somewhere, and then using a web service, the message magically comes back a few days later.
Right.
I don't use snoozing a lot, but Spark supports snoozing, and every once in a while I use it. For example, I got an email from my domain registrar a few days ago with a reminder to renew one of my domains, and I just snoozed the message for a couple of weeks. That's my ideal use case.
Yeah, I've got a few myself. I mean, one of the things, going back just for a second to extensions and integrations is, I like the custom integrations because, for instance, if you use the custom Todoist integration in Spark, it gives you the ability to pick the project and pick a due date and things like that, things that wouldn't normally or necessarily be available just from using a share extension. But I also always want to have the system share sheet available in case I want to do my own thing. And with the system share sheet, all I really want is the link to the message. I want to be able to copy that link and put it anywhere, whether it's notes or, Todoist or reminders or whatever it is. Those things are fairly important to me. I can live without a lot of the extra features. I mean, I think snoozing's like a trap. I try not to use snoozing because when I've used it in the past, I find that all my email just comes back and haunts me like a zombie, and it makes the situation even worse in the long term. But I do like to have things like delayed send, because sometimes I work weird hours.
Oh, that's a good one.
I just want to send the email to someone at a regular business hours the next day, because no one's going to see it at midnight anyway. So that's one that I'd like to see too.
Also, a few more email clients that do not truncate. long newsletters. We run into this problem usually with Club Mac Stories when we
Yes.
send a long email for Mac Stories Weekly, and I don't. It's always best when the email client figures out a way to display the entire newsletter in a single screen without having to open a web view, for example.
We have broken many email clients with Club Mac Stories.
Yeah, we have. Send an archive, another Gmail feature that I really like. I want to send a message. I want to compose a message, send it, and archive the entire thread when I go back to my inbox. So I'm not one of those users that when I reply to a message, I want my client to go to the next message. I want the client to go back to the inbox and archive the conversation that I just replied to. And Airmail does send an archive. I'm not sure that Spark does. So again,
It does actually.
It does on the Mac, because
At least on the Mac it does.
on the Mac it does. It does not on iOS. On the Mac, you have a drop-down menu in the Compose screen window
Right.
for Spark. There's no such menu on iOS. Also, a clean conversation view. Speaking of replying, I love the way the Spark shows you multiple messages in a conversation as individual boxes, snippets, whatever.
Right.
Basically, do not do what Apple Mail does. That it's if you when a conversation gets long. I mean, it's nicer now because at least they try to split up messages in multiple items when you open a thread. But it's not uncommon that I see Apple Mail show me like a long string of quoted text. When it gets, the color text that it's blue and then purple
Sure.
and then green. It still does that sometimes. I'm not sure if maybe Apple Mail doesn't know how to recognize threads, but I love the way the Spark presents threads, and also I think Outlook does a pretty good job. And the final one, I still have that question that I want to ask you, John.
I know. I was going to ask what that.
Hold on,
I'm
but
waiting.
the final one for me would be a clean and elegant iOS design. I don't want to use a web app. I don't want to use an iOS app that looks like a Windows program. I don't want to use something that feels like Slack, that it's a mix of web technologies and iOS technologies. I want to have an email client that looks like an email client on iOS. And to be fair, Apple Mail is the most polished one from this point of view because it looks native to iOS, and that's all I ask. So, for me, the problem with email clients is finding one that works both on the iPhone and the iPad. But I think that for you, it's even more difficult because you're not only are you looking for one that it's on iPhone and iPad, so fully iOS client, but also on the Mac because you use the Mac a lot in your typical workday. And has this been really a problem for you? How do you deal with this?
Yeah, it has been a problem. And I've toyed with using things like there are plugins and things you can use with Apple's Mac app, things like Mail Butler. The problem is that while those features that it has are great and I really like them, there's no iOS component, so that doesn't really get me all the way there. So what I've really been doing is looking. I've really narrowed it down. For a long time I've used Airmail, and Airmail has both Mac and iOS components, and their iOS app works on both the iPad and the iPhone, as does Spark. And I've gone back and forth between the two of them, and at the moment I'm trying out Spark again. I think that their Mac client is more advanced than iOS. I mean, we've mentioned some of the differences, and there are a lot of things. I know that they are working on a big release coming up in the new year, so hopefully we'll see that soon. And I'm hoping that brings feature parity, because I think for me that's that kind of seesaw of development that happens sometimes with some developers, where one operating system version gets ahead of the other, can be frustrating at times. And what I really want is, even if it were at the expense of advanced features, I'd rather have feature parity, because what I really want is the Ulysses of email clients. I want something that works and looks basically the same on Mac and iOS, because that's one of the strongest suits of Ulysses for me, is that, yeah, there are a couple things on the Mac that you can't do on iOS, but they're not the kind of things that you do day in and day out, like, the styles and that sort of thing. I want that with an email client, where the send button is roughly in the same place, where the panels kind of work the same way, where I can drill down in and everything syncs up. So I only have to really set up my email on one system or the other, and it's reflected when I make a change. And that's really hard to find. And I think Airmail and Spark do a pretty good job of that, but they're still not, I mean, as we've kind of gone through, they're not quite there entirely for me.
Well, it looks like if Apple makes it possible for developers to make universal iOS and macOS apps, that's going to be possible for you.
Maybe.
I have another one that I forgot to mention. This is a super niche one. You know, on Gmail has a weird way to deal with labels and folders when you sync them up using IMAP.
Yes. Right.
And some clients, if you have, and this is a problem for SaneBox, some clients like Newton, if a message is in a folder, like your Sane Later folder, you cannot archive that message because Newton thinks that it's already been archived because you've applied the label. I just want a client that no matter the way that it thinks about Gmail, I want to archive a Gmail message that is already in a folder. I want to say, remove this label and move it back to the archive. I don't care what you need to do for the IMAP synchronization, but it's the right way to do it. If it's in a folder, I want to archive it also.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I know that the problem is the weird Gmail API and the way that they do IMAP, but traditionally, most email clients, they work this way. Anyway, so what are we using now? You're back on Spark everywhere?
I am on Spark everywhere for the last few weeks, or not the last few weeks, really the last few days. I changed over on January 2nd, and I'm giving it a test run. So we'll see. It's too early to really say whether it'll stick, but so far I've been happy.
All right. I moved to Spark at least 2 months ago when I finally accepted that Airmail was too problematic for me. And I don't love it. I really like Spark. It's really clean. It's not my ideal client. It's not perfect. And the biggest problem, honestly, I think it's the inconsistencies between the Mac version and the iOS version, because the iOS version is less powerful than the Mac one. And that's a problem for me, because whenever I open the Mac and for example, right now I'm looking at Spark and I go like, well, this is so much more powerful than what I have on my iPad. And that's a problem for me. But also, it does enough. It's customizable. It looks clean. It's got the natural language search, supports push notifications. It's on the Apple Watch also. And the beta version on iOS has the read receipts that I really like. Turns out it has all the basic features that I want, but it's not my ideal client. And I agree with you when you say the Ulysses of email clients. I want something that is elegant, powerful, and consistent. But also, what Ulysses does is Ulysses is simple and minimalistic, and it works on iOS and on macOS. But if you're a power user, there's a lot of power behind the surface of Ulysses. Things like X callback and the workflow integration and all the things you can do with keyboard shortcuts, for example, and the filters for groups and gluing sheets together. It's a tricky balance to have this kind of app that looks minimalistic and simple and intuitive, but if you know what you're doing, you can do a lot of powerful things with it.
Right. It kind of grows with your needs, really, right?
Yeah. It scales. It's able to scale from a novice user to the professional user. And I really value that in an app like an email client that I'm going to use multiple times every single day. But my fear is that Ulysses can do this because it's now based on a subscription model. I fear that a similar business model couldn't be possible for an email client, because the idea of a subscription email client, it's probably a bit too far out for users to accept at this point. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe some developer will figure this out. But I fear that there's an expectation for email clients to be either free or business-oriented, with features for teams and the enterprise and people who use email clients for work. So I'm not sure how the iOS market will mature. The days of the paid upfront email client seems to be behind us. And I want to see some developers figure out, how to do a free email client with in-app purchases on iOS and the Mac. And maybe I'm wrong. And maybe just like it happened with text editors and not taking apps, for example, take a look at Ulysses and Bear, maybe we will also see a subscription-based email client on iOS. So I haven't lost hope in the ideal email client on iOS and the Mac. Hopefully in 2018 someone will get there. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. It's January and it can happen by December. I want to be optimistic.
Yeah, I'm optimistic too. I think I'd like to be optimistic. We've obviously had frustrations over a long period of time. There are companies trying to do it. Polymail is subscription based, for instance, but as you pointed out, that is largely focused on sort of an enterprise solution, and a lot of those subscription models, they're not really geared towards the individual or maybe the very small team. They're really geared towards companies signing on. And that probably makes sense given what the email ecosystem is like today. But I don't know that that's something that necessarily would work for an individual like you or me.
I have considered using not just email clients, but web services for the enterprise and signing up as a single user, saying like,
right.
I'm an enterprise of one, but I really like
Right.
what you've made here and I want to use your app. Sadly, that's often not possible because you need to get in touch with those companies and say, I am a company of 200 people. So it doesn't really work for me.
Right. All right, Federico. Well, I think that's it for this week. That was a great conversation about email. Thanks again to Streaks New Year's Resolution Bundle. We'll be back next week with another episode. And in the meantime, if you want to check out some of the things we talked about this week, go over to appstories.net and check out the show notes. And as always, you can find both of us writing on macstories.net and for Club Mac Stories. And of course, Federico's on Twitter. He's at Viticci, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.